depend on your family. You can't depend on your friends. You can't depend on a beginning. You can't depend on onion. You can't depend on intelligence. You can't depend on God.
Well, why do we need the bus turnaround campaign in New York City? So, New York City, around 7 million people in New York City use mass transit every single day, and 2 million of those people use buses every single day. And in New York City, what we've seen is that our buses have gotten significantly slower, and a lot of people have chosen to get off the bus because it's no longer a reliable option. But despite that, there are still 2 million people who use the bus and unfortunately are experiencing really long commutes, delays, and unfortunately just not reliable service. And so this is really impacting the riders' lives. And this means that they're getting to work late. This means that they're maybe losing their jobs or maybe taking opportunities because they don't have access to reliable transportation. And in New York City, while we do have a lot of trains here, we have rail, those places don't reach every part of New York City. There's a huge part of New York City that's only served by buses. And so these people only have a bus option to get out of their locations. And then there's some places that you can only get there by bus. And so there's a whole untapped area. There's like a lot of places in New York City that we really need buses. And so the reason we need to turn around, first and foremost, is because of the people who are on the bus. They are suffering, they're losing time, they're losing money, and we need to ensure that New Yorkers, no matter if you live by a subway or a bus, have access to reliable transportation. One, it's much cheaper than building a train or building a rail. And you have more flexibility to work with buses because you're not building anything. So this is why we need to turn around in New York City and all over the world.
And are the buses slower because there's more traffic congestion because they share the road?
Absolutely. So New York City, congestion in New York City in the last few years has exploded. And so a big thing is, buses are stuck in traffic. And so a big component of doing a turnaround is getting buses their own dedicated lane, which is a bus lane. That's a big component of the work that we're doing. It's actually also one of the most contentious. And yeah, they're just stuck in traffic, unfortunately.
And so do you have any bus lanes already, or is it a new thing?
So we do have some bus lanes. Unfortunately, they're not respected. So we have a few bus lanes across the city. We used to have our last mayor, Mayor Bloomberg, was really big on public transit. And so he started the bus lane and started putting them slowly but surely. But unfortunately, our current mayor, Mayor de Blasio, has not been really big on transit. And it's taken a few years to kind of get him to want to do bus lanes. So I should know the number on top of my head, but I don't. And we have, I want to say like 15 miles of bus lanes in the city. And we got the mayor to commit to adding 15 extra miles of bus lanes per year. But the thing about them is that they're really difficult. The reason today that I was almost late is because I have to run to court after this because a group of business owners are challenging a bus lane that we just place on the street. And so the reason buses are very slow is because they're met with so much community opposition. And people pile all their resources to fight a bus lane. So right after this, I'm going to court because of a bus lane, unfortunately.
Yeah, so one of the issues we face is to get people to actually know about the buses and that to take the buses seriously and use them. And so one of the things I was interested, you have your awards for the worst bus and the schlepper bus. And so how do you reconcile the idea of saying things are not good with buses with getting people to want to use them?
Well, I mean, I think in New York City, it's a little different. We already have people who are using them. And there are 2 million riders every single day, and there used to be 3. But I think in order for buses to be better, or for people to take them. Because our goal is, the way I like to frame the campaign, and maybe this is something that could be used over there. I am a public, as a community organizer, my job is to advocate with the people and the bus riders for better service, not so much of getting people back on the bus. That will happen naturally, but I mean, the reason that we talk about why the bus is so bad, rather than trying to get people back on the bus, is because we need to make sure that the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority here in New York City, is doing their job. They don't like press that's saying that they're bad at their jobs, and so we kind of hammer on that. The Governor Andrew Cuomo, hates when we talk bad about the MTA. He hates it, and so that's what we do, because we know that will get them to take action. Now, if you want to get people back on the bus, I think maybe the narrative will change, where we talk to bus riders who do take the bus to tell us why they love it, and then kind of push those stories out. And then also fight for reliable transit, because that always will get people back on the bus.
That's very good. And you work for an organisation called Riders NYC, is that right?
Riders Alliance.
Yeah, and tell me who do they represent?
So the Riders Alliance, we're a grassroots organization of subway and bus riders. And so what we do is organize everyday transit riders to learn how they can take their frustration that transit gives many New Yorkers and turn that into political action. And two, like I mentioned at the beginning, there are 7 million riders in New York City that use mass transit. If we were to be organized, we could be the most powerful constituency in New York City, and that's really our motto. So let's bring our subway and bus riders, and hold to learn how to use their frustration into action and hold their elected officials accountable. So a lot of our work is a lot of political education, a lot of lobbying. We do a lot of lobbying, and a lot of press and media to go ahead and elevate the stories and the narratives and voices of our riders.
And what do you say when people say the priority is to put more money into the subway? That we're working on?
Well, unfortunately, in New York City, we don't have that. Our governor refuses to put money into either. So it's a little bit interesting, because the governor refuses he likes to put all his money into bridges and into tunnels. So we have a little bit of a different situation here. If our governor says, I'm going to put money into, we spent the last 7 years trying to get him to commit to actually funding the subways. Currently in New York City, our subways are crumbling. The ceilings are falling off. The things are flooding. Our trains are 50 years old. So we have a little bit of a different story here. What to say, I think one of the arguments that we've been using on buses is, well, the trains can't go everywhere, right? The buses have more flexibility. So when we say, but the trains, we say, look, and I'm not sure what the situation is in Australia, over there in Australia, but here in New York, because our train is so old, our trains don't have elevators. They're not accessible. And so a big point for us for buses is that buses are accessible for our seniors. They're accessible for our children who can't go up and flights down the stairs because we don't have elevators. Our buses are important because they go to locations where there are no subways. And so what we talk about is why the buses we should focus on buses, is because it gives us a wider range and allows more people to participate in our city. And so our argument is we're trying to get the governor to focus on both. So it's a little bit of different, but that's kind of the talking points that we use here.
Okay, well, one last question. What's the most successful thing you've done so far?
Well, that's a big one. So I think the most successful thing that we've done when it comes to buses, very similar. Nobody was thinking about the bus before. It was all about the train. And so we've been able to make buses a talking point. People now care about the bus. We have taken all the elected officials to take a bus ride with us. We've gotten them all. We're taking a bus ride. But I think it's really hard to say the most successful thing, but I think the first step into making change is acknowledging that there's a problem. And we got MTA, the governor, and we got Mayor de Blasio to both acknowledge that there's a problem on the bus and committing to doing something about it. So that's really important, because when I started this work 3-4 years ago, the bus was this unknown thing, and now the buses are getting media all the time. People are talking about the bus, and it's now a political talking point, which in New York City, in our madness of politics, that's a big thing. And so I'm really proud of that, and I cannot wait to continue to push them to make sure that they keep those commitments. So then that way in 3 years, I can tell you buses all have dedicated lanes, but we're not there yet.
Okay, Stephanie, that's really good. So for just a bit of fun at the end, do you have a slogan that you say at your rallies? Do you have a chant or anything that you do?
Well, it all depends on what, on who we're talking to or what we want. So last week we did a rally because, like I said, mentioned, the governor has decided to reduce service on both buses and subways. He slipped it under, and we got all these cuts and service cuts. So we were like, when I say no, you say cut. No cuts, no cuts. Right? No service cuts. That was one. Sometimes we say, what do we want? Faster buses. When do we want them now? What do we want? Faster buses. When do we want them now? So that's a little bit of everything that we do here and there.
Thanks so much for your time. Good luck.